Hi, good afternoon. I hope you're all enjoying the day so far. To give a bit of an introduction to me, my name's Hannah, and I've been a QA tester for around 4-ish years now. Worked at a variety of companies, ranging from household names to teeny tiny micro indie studios, and now I'm at the BBC. Those of you who may have only heard of the BBC through things like Sherlock and Doctor Who, we are a public service broadcaster in England, Wales and Scotland, and Northern Ireland, and some of our stuff is available internationally. As part of our remit, everything we make has to be accessible to everyone. We don't prejudice against income, hence why everything is available for free. We don't prejudice against disabilities, age, race, gender, sexuality, anything. And we also provide a lot of content for children. So as I just said, the BBC does have an obligation to provide entertainment to the British public for free through a variety of platforms. You might have heard of things such as iPlayer, iPlayer Radio. Those are just some of the products we put out. And of course, this has to be available for audiences of all ages. The team I currently work in, which has a stupidly long title thanks to a reorganisation a couple of months ago, we focus on games aimed at children between the ages of 2 to 12 through these two brands, CBeebies and CBBC. The former, CBeebies, is aimed at kids aged 2 to 6, and CBBC is aimed at children 6 to 12. And of course, part of this service is providing entertainment to everyone, including people and children with disabilities. So of course, in order to do this, we have to ensure that all of our games are as accessible as possible. Just to give a bit of an idea of how busy we are, on average we release 3 games a month. If we include small game interactions and quizzes, that number goes up to more about 10 per month. At the moment in Games QA, there's just 2 of us, so bear that in mind. So obviously, naturally, this year our budgets have expanded quite a lot, and with this, the breadth and complexity of the games are also going to expand. So naturally, this has an effect on QA resourcing. And on top of developing and testing these 3 games a month, we also develop and maintain an in-house interaction engine called Iva. Any Brits in the audience might get why we have an engine called Iva, something to do with a TV show from the 50s, I think. So, we did have some problems going back about a year ago, maybe 12 to 18 months ago. That wasn't just resourcing. The first problem came about with a release of a game called Something Special, the Looking Game. It was designed to be completely blind friendly through the use of screen readers. So this game is based on the Something Special brand, which is aimed at preschool kids, so between the ages of 2 to 4. However, this brand is ridiculously popular with kids of all ages, kids of all abilities, and also quite a few adults as well. So in this game, the object of the game is to find items that Mr. Tumble, the main character, has lost. The gameplay of this game is you are shown a picture of the object. You can have it so that you are shown a photo of the object, or you are shown the Makaton symbol of the object, and then the object will animate and go behind one of 3 buttons. In the default play mode, the object goes behind a red, green, or blue button, but then in the colorblind mode, the object goes behind a triangle, circle, or square button. And then the voiceover kicks in saying which object the button went behind, and then if you tab through, you can select the correct button. Because of the age group that this game is aimed at, there are no negative consequences for getting it wrong. In fact, if you do get it wrong, Mr. Tumble pops up, makes a funny noise, and you get to go again. We found in user testing that kids actually much preferred the incorrect sound that you would get, so we're purposely not clicking the right object, because that's just how inclusive this game is. And as I said, it is playable through screen readers. It might not be the most fun game to play through a screen reader, but it can be played. However, a few weeks after launch, we received a complaint from a blind player stating that the game could not be accessed via a voiceover on iOS. It was still fine on TalkBack on Android, and I think it was still okay on PC, but it was iOS that just broke. So at the time, it was just me and my test manager in Games QA. So between the two of us and one very panicked project manager, we discovered that the final build we received into testing 3 hours before the game went live actually broke the screen reader functionality. Now, up until this point, we had, I believe, 21 builds throughout our final testing process, and builds 1 to 20 worked fine. Build 21 broke the screen reader functionality. But due to the time and resource issues, as I said, this build came in 3 hours before this game had to go live. We didn't have the time to regression test the build as thoroughly as we should have. At the same time, development had started on a new CBeebies app called Playtime Island. Unfortunately, this isn't available outside of the UK, so apologies to any non-Brits in the room. You can't test this app out for yourself. If I'd thought about it in advance, I would have put a copy on my phone, but I only just thought of that idea. So the purpose of this app is to bring our HTML5 games into the hands of our app audiences, and so that they can be played offline, so parents going on long car journeys with their kids can just keep them quiet by just putting our games on there, and so the kids can play them out and about. So now we need to not only consider games accessibility, but also app accessibility. And at times, I'm sure some of you can agree that they can be very different beasts. And of course, the introduction of this app also doubled our QA requirements. 1 certification period for the games to go on the websites, and 1 certification period for the app. And also the actual QA of the app itself, not just the games within the app. So essentially we had 3 QA work streams at the time between 3 of us. So within a few months, we obviously ramped up recruitment, and we went from a team of just 3 of us to a team of 6 of us, which obviously in turn meant doubling our accessibility training. Now at the BBC, we have a lot of documentation. A lot of it, as referenced earlier, is publicly available, such as the subtitle guidelines. And another set of guidelines that are publicly available are the mobile accessibility guidelines. These guidelines, so obviously the BBC is aiming for a mobile-first digital portfolio. However, not a lot of these guidelines are applicable to games. They are applicable for things like TV, radio, iPlayer, sport, basically anything else other than games. So obviously we had to deal with the issue of training these new testers, but also trying to adapt these guidelines for what we required. Excuse me. So a lot of our improvements came from compiling a games accessibility guideline document from the ground up. This was done with the help of the BBC's digital accessibility team, and resources available from gamesaccessibilityguidelines.com and other online resources. And we also found it was a great way to get QA and UX to work together, because it's very rare that you get QA and UX working together. It's normally UX and devs and QA. So that was quite fun. So how does this relate to QA? Whilst it's the responsibility of everyone involved in the project to keep tabs on the accessibility of a game, certification is the certification and testing is the final gate or the final boss a game has to go through before being released into the wild. Everyone involved in the creation of a game at the BBC has anywhere between 1 and 5 projects on the go at any given time. So it's incredibly easy for things to slip through the cracks. Just to give you a bit more of an idea of that, whilst I'm here at GDC this week, I've had to hand over 4 projects to another tester who now has to deal with 7 projects this week. I just hope he doesn't hate me by the time I get back. Also, whenever people like our project managers go on holiday, their workload doubles, and it can get really difficult to not only remember what stage of accessibility games are at or what stage in the development process they're at, but also what games are in development. So we actually came up with some solutions. This is just our current solution that we are working at the moment. It might be that when we do a review in a few weeks' time, we want to make some changes. But the first improvement that we've done is we have ramped up our documentation. I have a screenshot here of TestRail, which is a test case and test suite application that you can use. Nobody outside of QA, or at least where I work, not many people outside of QA even knows this exists. It's purely a QA owned thing. And the second screenshot we have here is the title page of the Children's Games Accessibility Guidelines and Recommendations document, which is a really long title when you're going to say it out loud. But in all honesty, not much has changed in the practical aspect of our testing. The more effective changes have come from the implementation of more robust processes and documentations. Thanks to my previous experience at some other companies who I won't name right now, we have adopted a certification testing system very similar to what other publishers use, which are basically a set of technical tests that must all be passed before a game is cleared to go live. At the moment, in our certification test case master document, the biggest section of these tests is now accessibility, ranging from things like colour contrast to screen reader usage to being able to use the keyboard, being able to use a switch. Basically anything you can think of that could come under the umbrella of accessibility, it's there. The next set of improvements we've made are what I am going to call the 4 Cs. I kind of only just made that up a couple of minutes ago, so apologies for it being a really bad name. First of all is collaboration. Over the last year, we have undertaken 2 big research projects in a huge crossover between QA and UX. The reason why we are working with UX quite a lot is because of the BBC's Accessibility Champion Network, which is this huge network. We've now got over 100 members of this network, where there's at least one person in every team championing accessibility for their products. In the games team, I am one of the accessibility champions, and in UX for children's games, there's also one, hence why we're working together. We're attacking the problem of accessibility from the start of the project with UX to the end of the project with QA. So the first of these research projects was in collaboration with the University of Edinburgh in Scotland with experts in autism. We went out to schools and spent a few days with specialist schools and mainstream schools, interacting and observing with kids with autism on all ends of the spectrum. We learned a lot about how to design games specifically for children with autism, but also how to design and test more mainstream games, but still be inclusive to people with autism. The second big research project that we've done is a sort of like an audit into how our games currently work with switches. We've been collaborating with external consultants, which neither of these two projects are anywhere near their conclusion yet. They started last year and they are pretty big beasts, but really fun to work with. So whilst most of these research projects have tended to focus on how to design games for different abilities, we found that having a tester, me, involved in reporting back to the QA team has increased the understanding of how and why something has been designed in a particular way. Because we firmly believe that if QA are involved from the start and know exactly what's happening and also why something is happening, then we can create better test cases and be more involved from the start and test every build straight from a prototype all the way through to the final release candidates. The second C is champion accessibility at all levels. So I just briefly spoke about the Accessibility Champions Network at the BBC. And I said members of this network range from the top down through the project hierarchy. So we've got like heads of departments involved all the way down to people on TV shows who basically do a lot of behind the scenes work on TV shows. So whilst creating a network like this might be impractical within a game studio, there's absolutely nothing wrong with championing accessibility yourself, even if you have to become that person who in every meeting says, well, what about accessibility? If you don't do it, nobody else will. Or they might, and then you can gang up and get your product managers completely on board. So the way I see it is that if you can see a way for your games to become more accessible for your players, speak up. The results are nearly always worth it. The third C is consistency. So all of our documentation uses the same terminology, the same industry jargon, the same definitions, and they're all presented in a very consistent manner. And we found by doing this, our in-house developers know exactly what's going on, our third-party developers know exactly what's going on, product managers know exactly what's going on without having to go to 10 different meetings, and more importantly, QA don't get confused, which is something I would very much like in my life, to be less confused. And then finally, communication. Normally one would hope that common sense would prevail, but this is a point that most people tend to forget. The open communication lines between the games team and the apps team, the games team and our third-party developers, the apps team and the QA team, you get the picture, just how open lines of communication between all the different teams just trying to create one game has been unparalleled in helping people to improve the accessibility of all of our games. Accessibility design and testing is now a separate section in all project kickoff meetings, and we have found that accessibility issues found during certification have actually decreased with the developers who show enthusiasm for accessibility during these kickoff meetings. And now that our QA team is larger than it's ever been, we used to have monthly QA catch-ups, just like 20 minutes in the kitchen, just like, oh, so what have you been working on this one? This has now been increased to weekly, and they've gone from 20 minutes to 45 minutes long. This has allowed all of us testers to get together and to discuss various testing issues for any new accessibility tips and tricks can very be easily passed on, and then just backed up with a quick then just backed up with a quick reminder email and documentation. So whilst we are in a much better position with regards to accessibility QA than we were a year ago, we are always looking at ways to improve our processes. So first of all, we really want to do more research. In fact, the first day that I'm back in the office next week is actually an all-day prototyping workshop for new types of accessible interactions. So I don't think I'm actually going to go back to the office next week, which is quite scary. Then more training. So we've got all of our testers on board, but now it's time to get all of our developers on board. It's time to get all of our product managers on board. There's this myth going around that accessibility starts and stops with screen readers in our team. I don't know how this started, but it's my goal in 2017 to wipe that myth out of the window and to get everyone on the same page. Maintaining documentation. It's a boring task, but somebody's got to do it, because otherwise we'll just end up reverting back to where we were 18 months ago, with games going live that, whilst being advertised as being screen reader accessible, aren't. Then working groups. I recently started up a working group within the BBC of all testers who are accessibility champions. This group is called Alley Cats. I did not come up with the acronym, but it stands for Accessibility Champion Testers. Yeah, I think that's correct. Where all of us who are part of the Accessibility Champion Network, who are also testers from all products of the BBC, get together and we learn from each other, because how I might test for, say, colour contrast, for example, might be completely different to how somebody in iPlayer tests for it, and they might be able to do it more efficiently. So we learn from each other and we all improve. We want to continue emphasising communication, because as we've already proved, the more open and honest we are with each other, not only within the project team as a whole, but also the QA team, the better and more smoothly things go. And then finally, reviewing processes on a regular basis, which is something that all studios should probably do. I recommend reviewing processes on about a 3 to 4 month basis, so that you've got some time for the new processes to settle in before being able to say, yep, this is working, or absolutely not, let's go back to the way things were. So thank you. I think I rushed through that quite quickly. My contact details are there, hannah.bunce@bbc.co.uk. Thank you.